So can we give a rousing July 15th kind of welcome to my friend Brian, all the way from New York City? Come on. So this is my friend Brian. So let me give you a little context. So many of you, or most of you will know that 2 years ago, we started a program. I started an MA program through a school in California called Fresno Pacific University and Seminary, and I showed up there, and Brian is one of the guys in my class. So I got to meet Brian. He's from New York City. You'll get to hear a bit of his story in just a second. But Brian, clearly, from the very beginning, we knew he was like the smartest person in the class. You know when you just kind of know? So that's totally Brian. He may not say that, or maybe he will. I don't know. But
totally the smartest person.
Totally the smartest.
Totally am. Yeah, of course.
So
the most humble.
That's right. So most of our time is always online. Every Monday we're online together for a period of time as a cohort, as a class, and then we have most of our work is just done individually, which is why the program works for me. But then once a year we get together for a week. And so this is the week that our cohort is together. And instead of me having to go to California, or last year we were in Minnesota, the cohort is all coming to Canada. So some of the US friends have never been to Toronto, or actually some of them have never been to Canada before. So they're all flying in today, and this whole week we're together. So when I knew that was happening, I thought it'd be awesome to have Brian come hang out with us. And he was more than gracious to do that. On the side of, I always tease Brian as well, is that because most of our program is online, that whenever it glitches, or sometimes the teacher gets booted out of the video call, I don't know how that all works, but sometimes the teacher gets glitchy, we always just joke and say, okay, Brian, take over the class. You clearly could lead us through this. So I'm just really excited that we can learn from Brian. But first, just tell us a little bit about you. I think we have a family shot too of your crew.
Sure, put the family shot up there.
Here's the shot.
That's everyone but me, and that's not because they wanted the photo without me. They were just in a different place at the time. So that's my wife of 21 years, Allison, and then our kids, Brooklyn. That's our daughter, Brooklyn. Those are twin boys on the outside, Campbell on the left and Xavier on the right, born on the same day, I promise, to the same woman. And then down there, so we have 3 kids in college and 1 first grader. So there was a little,
Hello.
Miracle or accident or blessing. We don't know still what Ellis is, but we love him and are thankful to have him in our life.
It's great. So Brian was a church planter in New York City. When did you plant that church? What year was that?
2005.
And you did that for a number of years.
That's right.
Yeah, and the church is still going, which is always a mark of a good church plant, is when the founding pastor transitions and it's still rolling. I actually was Googling them a bit this morning early, seeing what the church is up to. But that's not the role you're in now. So specifically, why don't you tell us the role you're in now, what you're doing in the city, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So, yeah, we led the church for about 10 years and then moved away to San Francisco for a little while, and I worked with people who were incarcerated, both in and out of prison, teaching them entrepreneurship, and then got a call to come back to New York City about 2 years ago to work with people who are homeless. And so my job specifically is to work with the multiplicity of organizations that serve people who are homeless in the city. So in New York, as you know, it's a big city of about 8 million people, and there's about 60,000 people who are homeless, 23,000 children, and about 5,000 to 7,000 who live on the street with no home. And so my primary job is to help these organizations work together.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that group in a second.
Sure.
One of the stories, or one of the things we like to do as a church, often is we have someone will share their story a little bit about why they chose to follow Jesus, how that all went down. Can you just give us the snapshot of your own personal journey towards Jesus, how that all kind of unfolded and happened? I know that could be like, I'll spend 20 minutes, but what's kind of a little bit of your
You guys don't have anywhere to go today, do you, right? So we're good. Yeah, good question. So why Jesus? I think asking me that question is similar to me asking you why you're Canadian. Or probably a lot of us in this room, from wherever we might be, whether we're Canadian or Irish or whatever, why are you Canadian? Well, I was born here, right? I was born into the faith, and I don't know if that's true of some of you, but I was raised in the church. I was raised as a follower of Jesus. I was like many of these kids here who showed up every Sunday and didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what it was. It was just the only thing I knew. But then there came a time where I got really disillusioned with the church. I don't know if anyone here has ever like had doubts or questions or wondered like, are we really singing to anyone? Does any of this stuff really matter? But I had like this picture of God that started to form in my head when I was a teenager. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the author Tozer. I know we both heard of Greg Boyd, who's one of our professors, but Tozer once said that what you think about when you think about God is the most important thing about you. You ever heard that? What you think about when you think about God is the most important thing about you. Greg Boyd says the mental picture you have in your head of who God is will shape your life more than anything else. So I started realizing as a teenager that I had a really bad picture of God, and it was the only picture of God that I had in my head. And this picture reminded me of a soccer game I played with my son the other day. So Ellis, who was on the screen, the little one, my 5-year-old. Any soccer players? You call it soccer here or football?
No, we call it soccer.
Call it soccer? Yeah. Okay. Any soccer players in here?
Well,
not one. There's not a single person who even cares. Is it just hockey?
One person.
Is that it? Is that all we care about?
One person cares right here.
CFL? Okay, we have one person. All right, so, and this girl over here plays soccer. So my son Ellis, a couple of Saturdays ago, he goes, Dad, I want to go outside. I want to play a real game of soccer, a real game. And I'm like, okay, one-on-one soccer isn't real, but okay, let's go outside. And we went out. So we live in this big apartment complex, and we have this tiny little fake backyard, like fake grass backyard. But we set up like the soccer field, with the goals and the out of bounds, so the ball just doesn't go forever. And at the time of this little event that I'm about to tell you about, the score was 2-1. I was beating him 2-1. Not that the score really matters. I wasn't really keeping count of how, bad I was pummeling my son, but score was 2-1. And so Ellis dribbles the ball up and he kicks it. And, let's say that the microphone right there is like in the goal. The ball goes like 3 feet outside of the microphone, outside of the goal. And I turn around to go get it, and he goes, 2-2. And I was like, I turned around and go, no, that didn't go in, 2-1. Again, not that the score matters to me all that much, but it
really seems to matter to you.
It's 2-1. And so I go grab the ball, he goes, no, 2-2. And I was like, bro, it is not, I don't want to teach my kid that it's okay to cheat and count the score and all those kind of things. So I go, no, listen, it's 2-1. It went outside the goal, and he grabs the ball from me. He goes, no. Here's what happened. And he shows me how, he kicked it. It had this major spin that brought it back inside the goal and then spun right back out. And he goes, see, 2-2. And I was just like, how do I continue on with this? And so I just go, no, it's 2-1. Let's just keep playing. And he goes, well, I have a different score in my brain. And turned around. I was like, I have a different score in my brain too. It should be 10-0. I gifted you 1 goal, right? All that to say, quite honestly, that's the picture I had of God in my head for a very long time. That he was keeping score. And that I was always having to fight to earn points on God's scoreboard, that he was saying, okay, if you do these things, then you're right with me. You mentioned a moment ago, it's summertime, a lot of people are traveling. I could have missed church growing up. And if I did, there was this guilty feeling that I have lost points with God. I'm on the bad side. Or that song we sang earlier and the passage that Justin read, there's nowhere you can go that God doesn't know about your presence, that was a scripture verse that was used as a weapon growing up. You can't go anywhere, bro. I don't know if there's any high schoolers in here that
God's
are worried if
you.
God
Yeah.
No, God is watching you. So I went through this big disillusionment of okay, I don't think I care. Because I can't compete with God. You win, right? And finally, I had someone show me that's not the picture of God that you need to have in your head. That's not who God is. He's not keeping score. There isn't this exchange where you earn points and God loves you more, you lose points and God loves you less. God loves you, and there is no competition. And it's almost like, if we can go back to the backyard for just a second, it's almost like, I had gone to the park my whole life, because I'm a big sports addict. I had gone to the park my whole life just to compete, to play football or soccer or baseball and to win. And then somebody took me to the park and showed me that there's actually flowers and trees and a lake, and there's like all this beauty there that I had missed out on my whole life. And I felt like that's what somebody did with God. Like, you're missing out on like the most important aspect of who God is. And there's another way to read the Bible and see, that God is not in competition with you. God is inviting you to like help cultivate the earth and God's people, and to create an environment where people can see like the beauty of God. So I used to follow Jesus because I think I had to or else, and now it's what you said about even being here today. Like, we just get to do it, and I'm thankful to be a part of it.
Yeah, on that playground analogy you used, I think it's interesting because sometimes people as well would feel like, does God want me to go on the swing set now? Or do I go on the slide now? Or am I on the merry-go-round now? And they get so caught up in, I think it's making sure they always do the right thing in the right order, that they don't see, like, God's given us, not to beat this to death, but God's given us this playground, and he wants to walk with, like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, he just wants to enjoy it with us.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the Rescue Alliance. I think we have a picture, Sai. If my research is right, there's maybe 6 organizations that are a part of. So talk to us a little bit. You explained a few moments ago that you are executive director of the Rescue Alliance, which brings together different agencies or missions in the city. So just, can you tell us a little bit how that works? I'm not sure we have something exactly like that, although maybe I just don't know. So what does that look like?
Again, that could take a long time to explain, but and I don't know how rampant homelessness is in Toronto or Oakville, to give you kind of like that mental picture. But in New York, if you've been to the city, you can't walk but a couple of blocks, and you will see a number of people who are homeless, who are living on the street. And there's all sorts of organizations that are trying to do good work, but oftentimes work in either silos or compete for donor dollars. And no one organization can do everything to fix the problem, right? And so the goal with the Rescue Alliance is to regularly meet together and to facilitate collaboration so that we can fill in the gaps on homelessness. Does that make sense to you? So, I think about, just to give like a story to kind of tell, like, here's what I try to do, or here's what we try to do. I think it was my 3rd day on the job. So I just moved back from San Francisco. I'm now seeing New York through a totally different lens, because I was a pastor, much like Matt was, and now I'm coming back and I'm working in this nonprofit world with people who are homeless and helping these organizations work together. So I was sitting down having coffee at a coffee shop with an outreach worker, and I think it was my 2nd or 3rd day on the job, and we were catching up. I had just met him. It's Josiah, our mutual friend. And while I'm talking to him, like, he notices something is going on behind me, and while I'm talking, he's really not paying much attention to me, but he's looking behind me, and then he'll circle back in, and then he'll look, and finally he just kind of like, okay, can you move over for just a second? And he leans into this person behind me that I hadn't noticed yet, and he says, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" And like, I didn't notice, and I don't know if anybody else in the room had noticed, but he knew, based on everything he'd seen, that he was seeing a homeless teenager at a coffee shop. That's what his intuition was. And this girl opens up to Josiah, like, miraculously, and tells Josiah that she's a transgender girl who got kicked out of her house in Atlanta and was now in New York City living in one of our city shelters that can sometimes be dangerous. And she had been staying in a place called Bellevue. And as soon as she said the words Bellevue, like, both of us were like, oh no, this 17-year-old girl in Bellevue. And she talked about some of the bad things that had happened in Bellevue over the last couple of nights. And she was desperately seeking an alternative. So all these organizations that are listed up here, there's not a single one. I'm telling you what I do, but I'm also telling you like what's missing. There's not a single organization that's listed on the screen that I work with that does anything for homeless youth, specifically nothing for LGBTQ youth. And I'm on my second or third day on the job, and so Josiah pulls out his phone and starts scrolling through a number of organizations that might be able to take her. And so we finally find one that might be able to take her. He calls this organization up, and an aside is there's about 5,000 to 7,000 adult homeless, and there's somewhere between 2,000 and 7,000 homeless youth living on the street, who are often caught up in trafficking, et cetera. And this place said, well, we can take her if you send her right now. They normally turn away about 100 people a month. And so we tell her name is Shay, and we tell her, and she's like elated that there's a place for me to go, that I'm going to be with peers. And my friend Josiah says, we're so happy that we found a place for you. Can we pray for you? And the moment he said, can we pray for you, she came undone. I mean, undone. And she explained to us that it was her Christian parents in Atlanta who kicked her out of the house because she's transgender. And I've learned now that it's about 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ, and about 70 to 80% have been kicked out or abandoned by their religious parents. And she opened up this note that she had from her parents who had locked her out of her house, put her bags on the porch, and said, when you turn away from your evil ways, we will welcome you again into our loving arms. And it crushed both of us. And so our alliance now for the last 2 years has been working on not just filling in the gaps of where a single adult male homeless person might fall through the cracks on detox or something, but now we are creating our first youth shelter that will open its doors for any homeless youth in New York City. So sometimes that's kind of cool.
It's amazing.
So sometimes it's collaborating to fill the gaps, and sometimes it's collaborating to create something new. That's what we do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Josiah is the leader, one of the leaders of New York City Relief.
That's right.
Yeah, and he's also in our program, so that's been, okay. On that point, so at one point in time, you were in the city as a church planter. Your focus was establishing a local community in a certain neighborhood in New York. And we understand a little bit of that. And then you went through a process and a change in leadership. You're still the same person, still the same heart for Jesus, learning new things as you go. Now you're in this executive director role, working with these amazing organizations. What does it mean for you to pastor in just a different way? Sometimes we think of the role as pastors like, well, you're leading in the church, and then we have conversations about all of us in our own work environments, our own contexts. We're representing Jesus in those spaces. We're pastoring, leading people. Whether we think we're a pastor or not, that whole idea of priesthood of all believers, as we follow Jesus, we're representing Jesus to the people we're with. And now you're doing it in a whole different way, but you're still the same person. What's been some of the learnings just to work as a follower of Jesus in and through a different kind of means and mechanisms? What have you learned about that, and what might we learn from you in that way?
So I said when I came back to New York, I was like seeing it through a new lens, right? And I had this bad picture of God growing up, and then I got to see God through a new lens. And now that I'm working, so I don't primarily speak on Sunday mornings anymore. I speak on Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. in a homeless shelter regularly. So there's about 200 men and women who sleep on the street, and then they come into this shelter for a meal. And while they're waiting on their meal, like there's music, and my son will lead worship, and then I'll get up there and teach. And like teaching the Bible to people who are homeless is a challenge, because you can't get up there and just like give all your regular information, because now I've been trying to see God through the lens of someone who's homeless. Does that make sense? Yeah. So how do you see God's promises through the lens of someone who has no home, has no job, and has been abandoned by their family or whatever, right? so I picked up this new word that I think is helping me both learn about God and then help other people see God in a different way. So I'm going to try to teach you all a new word today. Is that all right? Can we try that? So a couple of years ago is when I learned this word when I was working with people who were in prison. And I was in a leadership cohort with a bunch of nonprofits. And the leader of our cohort was leading us on a racial reconciliation journey. And he taught us this word, this greeting in the Zulu language, which can be found in like the southern natal tribes in South Africa. So like in English, when we say hello to each other, we just say hello, right? Or does anybody here speak a different language? Anybody here speak more than one language? I know that Matt speaks French fluently, right?
Brian was asking me when I picked him up at the airport yesterday if I also speak French. All I said was un petit peu, and I think that's all I could get going on. So yeah, definitely.
Anybody here? I saw someone raise their hand. Now they're not raising their hand. Anybody speak French? Spanish? Anybody speak English? Do we speak English in the room? A little bit. We got Justin's like, maybe, okay? Well, it depends on sort of like what language you speak. Like you can say hola or hello or au revoir or whatever those different languages are. But then even sometimes there's like the same words have different meanings, right? And I've always been sort of fascinated with the power and the capacity that language has to have different meanings in different contexts. Like in Canada, there's a whole different culture around certain words, right? So like today we were driving down here, and I forget what you were talking about, but you were like, you were talking about traffic going into Toronto today is going to be a gong show. It's just going to be a total gong show. And fortunately, I had looked up that word this morning.
That's a Canadian thing?
I knew what that meant. I knew what gong show meant. That's a total Canadian thing, right? Like the word keener is a total Canadian thing. I learned that word. Do you know what keener means?
Yep.
Yeah, he knows
we know
what
that
means.
is, right?
Knows what
Alex?
keener means, right? And so, but like if you came to New York and talked about how I was such a keener to our professor,
Sorry,
I would have.
I didn't mean you were a keener. I meant, anyways, sorry, I just want to make sure I was not slamming my friend here, sorry.
You're calling him a keener?
No,
'cause
'cause
now I know what that means. That's
Alex
quite rude.
is moved from the UK here, so I was just making it correct. Does he also know what keener means? I wasn't calling, this is taking way too long. Anyways.
So anyway, all right, so let me teach you this new word, because again, the greeting in English is hello, maybe in Spanish it's hola, ciao, whatever. But in the Zulu language, in these southern natal tribes, the way they greet one another, here's the word. So repeat this word after me. Sawubona. Sawubona. Let's say that one more time. Sawubona. Sawubona. It means, I see you. Isn't that cool? I see you. Sawubona. I see you. That's how they greet one another. And then the response to Sawubona, repeat this word after me, is Sikona. Say that one more time. Sikona. And what that means is, so Sawubona means I see you, and Sikona means, and because you see me, I am now here. Like, isn't that rich? Like Sawubona, I see you, and Sikona, and because it's almost as if before you saw me, I didn't exist. And so a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with my friends who are homeless down at one of these shelters, and I asked, we walked through the word Sawubona, and I said, do you ever get the feeling that people who are on their way to work or on their way home in New York don't see you? Like, do you ever get the feeling that sometimes they don't see you, but they try to see past you, right? Like, because there are times when someone who's homeless needs something, they need help, and they ask for help, and it is quite easy to just keep walking and to not see them, right? It's quite easy in a coffee shop for me and everybody else to not see this girl, and Josiah saw her, but sometimes people just see past you, or they think they can see right through you. Like, I know how you got there, I know why you're there, and I know what you need to do to get out of it. If you could just pick yourself up by your bootstraps like me, then you would, be in a much better place. I see past you, I see through you, or I see the evil inside you, right? And this isn't limited to people who are homeless. My guess is there's a number of us in this room who from time to time have felt as if we are unseen, unnoticed, unimportant at our jobs or at school or at home. Maybe we've had a parent who said, I wish you were never born. Maybe some of us in the room have experienced a spouse who once said, I don't ever want to see you again. And so one of the things I'm learning about what it means to pastor in this new context is I want to try, and I'm learning this myself, but I want to try to help everyone see the people and the pain that is right in front of them. Because once we see it, then we can lean into it and show care and compassion. But if I don't ever see you for anything other than like the pastor, right? For anything other than just someone who can serve me coffee, for anyone other than just, going to give me what I need, then I'll never be able to really know you. And the same thing goes with our homeless friends, same thing goes with my spouse, same thing goes with my children. If I never really see them, then I'll never listen to them, and they'll never be heard, and then they will have this really terrible picture in their head, I think, of who God is. A God who only wants something from us, not a God who sees us. And because he sees us, we are now here. So literally my whole day is filled up with me running this tape in my head of Sawubona, I see you. Our goal, my goal, is to help people in New York see one another. Does that make sense?
That's amazing. Yeah, that's so good. I was explaining to Brian how the culture of table is such an important part for us as a church, about the reasons we gather. We could have lots of different reasons why we're together as a community in any different time, but one of the main things we think is important is about being around the table together. And as you're sharing this, I think maybe one of the beauties of coming around and sharing a meal is that when you say to people, everyone has a seat at the table, even if we don't agree on everything, but you're always welcome at the table. In essence, kind of what you're saying is, you have a space here and I will see you when you sit down. And every person who sits at the table then adds their journey, their ups and downs, their flavor to the conversation, and we all are changed because that person sat down. And so the trick then as a church is, how do we continue to extend the table so there's more and more seats available for more and more people, so that when they sit down, then they're seen and noticed. That is so good. Sawubona. Bono.
That's all right. You can look it up later. Sawubona.
That's so good, man. Thank you for sharing that. I just feel like that's a huge challenge for a local church to say, how do we see the people in our community? Not just so they exist to show up to what we're doing or just contribute to what we're doing, but how do we see them and just honor them? Man, that's huge. So good. I feel like you're just getting going, so I'm trying to figure out the best way to... I guess one of the things I'd love to ask you, in your own journey as you grow, and we were talking about this at dinner last night, we've all had different things that we've let go of or changed or embraced, and our progression in following Jesus as we mature and learn more, we kind of flex and change and let go of some things or embrace things more deeply, or the things, maybe we try to stop holding everything at the center and we let some things go and just keep Jesus more in the center. Just as you as a person, as a husband, dad, but just Brian, what are some of the things that, or maybe one thing, what is one thing that you would say, this is really how God is shaping me and what I'm learning that's kind of changing me? Maybe it has to do with some books you've been reading lately, or some friends that you've been having conversations with, or what are you learning that we could just listen to and beyond just what you've shared with us? But is there something specific where you're like, in my own journey as a disciple, here's something that stands out to me that God is doing in ways God is shaping me?
Sure. So we have I said I've been married for 21 years, if you saw that picture earlier. So, a daughter who's 21, so we had a baby straight away, and then had twins right after that, and now this new surprise. And most of my work as I've been growing up, first of all, it started off as a competition to try to please God, and then it was this new take. But I'm sort of wired to start things, to break out and do new things. And when we first started the church that I led, is called Forefront. My marriage of, at that point, I think 9 or 10 years, like, just hit the skids. Like, my marriage went from like fun, 3 kids, to complete stress, carrying all this weight on my shoulders all the time. And I had this idea in my head that I'm out doing like big, fantastic work to change the world, while my wife and kids and everybody else was sort of there to keep things going as normal so that I could go do the really big things. And of course, that was a terrible way to look at it, but at the time, that's what I thought. And it regularly got me in a bad place with my wife and my children. I was working 80 hours a week. I was, spending all my time with other people and no time at home, and just thought, this is the way it is, and you need to get used to it. And that landed us in therapy for a couple years, And so thankfully, by the grace of God and $10,000 worth of therapy, we're still together. But something I realized, and this it didn't awaken in me, somebody told me this, and now we have this framed over over our kitchen sink. And there's this, I don't know who said it first, doesn't matter. But the phrase over our kitchen sink, it's a picture of a pile of dirty dishes right over our kitchen sink, which with 4 kids, always dirty. We don't need the picture. We have the real thing right there. But there's this phrase right above it that we see every morning, and it says, everybody wants to change the world, but no one wants to do the dishes. Everybody wants to change the world, but no one wants to do the dishes. And what I finally realized is that there is just as much honor in doing the dishes as there is in going out and trying to, quote unquote, change the world. In fact, what I've noticed with these organizations, like I said, I don't stand up on a stage and teach anymore. Like, nobody knows who I am. Nobody cares. Nobody knows who any of these people are. They're all social workers who do all their work on the ground, in the trains, on subways, working with people who have spent all night sleeping on the street. They don't have Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts. Nobody's asking them to come speak at their big mega conference. But they are the ones who are doing like the dirty grunt work that is absolutely honoring God and changing lives in ways that I never noticed years ago. So there's been this significant change in the way I see my wife, my children, my own life. Like, it used to be a massive, headache is the nicest way I can say it, when I would be relegated to like the mundane work that was required to keep our family going. Like, I just skirted it as long as I could until I finally couldn't do it anymore unless I wanted to live by myself. And then I realized, just to go back to the competition thing for a minute, you tell I'm a big competitor. I realized something. I pulled out my phone one day and I set the timer on how long it took me to do the dishes. 7 minutes. 7 minutes, and I was willing to ruin my marriage over 7 minutes. I was willing to get rid of my kids and get rid of my wife just so that I could go do the really important stuff. And then I timed it one day and I was like, you are an imbecile. That you would give away all the good things that your family brings just so that you can go off and do the important stuff. And so now, I can't say that if I didn't have a family, I would do the dishes straight away if I lived on my own. But now I love doing all the things that nobody ever gets credit for, that I used to avoid because I liked doing the things you get credit for. And I've realized that God exists in both places. But I think that God, like you think about the book of Matthew where he says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing when you give something away. Don't tell anybody about it. And I feel like all of those little things that people do that get no credit, whether, it doesn't matter if it's at home or a job and nobody knows what you do, like God is looking at you and saying, I'm honored by that. And so now I try to not only do that, but see that work in other people and recognize them for it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Are you okay if we just see if there's any comments, things like that? Anyone have any questions,
Only if they're
comments,
positive.
thoughts, constructive criticism?
Awkward silences.
No, we do this all the
It's
time.
good.
It's okay. Just wait. I just try to wait them out. Mel, yeah.
Thanks for coming. It's awesome. Are you seeing effectiveness with the Rescue Alliance, like everybody working together? Is there better communication? Are you seeing, change with the numbers decreasing for those that are homeless because of the Alliance?
Yeah, so the question, just in case you couldn't hear it, is are we seeing any positive results out of the Alliance working together? And I think the answer to that is yes, like we're creating a youth shelter where there wasn't a youth shelter before. And then on the other side of it, it's too early to tell. When I first came into the role, they gave me 2 years without having to raise any money, which was kind of nice because my prior job, all I did was raise money. So they're like 2 years, just work on the problems, and we'll provide your salary. And then after 2 years, we'll see. And a couple of leaders within our organization was like, we're not going to know after 2 years whether this thing is like really working. It's probably going to take like 5 or 10. No guarantee that you're gonna have a job for that long necessarily, but like that might be how long it's going to take. And so like there's little moments where there's opportunity for praise and success. The friend I was telling you about earlier who's the outreach worker, like we have now created a new initiative that would take a long time to talk about, that pairs their greatest strength, their core competency, with another organization's core competency. And then they brought in 3 other organizations to all work together to be able to get someone on the street the help they need and then advocate for them along the way, rather than just like handing them a referral and saying, good luck with your life. It's, we will go with you to detox. We will go with you to counseling. We will go with you on your job interview. We will sit with you. And so we do an annual outreach in February called Don't Walk By. And we walk nearly every street in Manhattan. We serve about 1,100 people who are on the street over the month of February. And there's about 25 organizations that partner together. Well, this last February, on the first night, we met a man and his wife was quadriplegic, in a wheelchair, panhandling out on the street for enough money to stay in a hotel. I mean, horrific situation. Again, there's not a single organization up here, so we find our weaknesses all the time. There wasn't a single organization up here who could provide shelter for the couple. They would do it for the individual, but they couldn't do it for the couple. Well, this woman's quadriplegic. She's like, I can't stay on my own. So one of our organizations decided to foot the bill for a hotel for a couple nights so that they could like stabilize and then get them the help they need. And then another social worker came along and said, I'll be their advocate. And when they follow what the guide is, we'll hear more of their story and we'll follow what the guide is, then we will, proceed. 2 months later, we had raised just over $8,500 to keep them in a hotel this whole time. And in New York, I don't know if it's probably like this everywhere, but you can only stay in a hotel for like 7 days. You can't stay long term, because then you earn what they call squatters' rights, where you could like literally just like legally stay there. So they kick you out after 7 days. So they moved around hotels like 12 times. We raised like $8,500 for them. And I think it was, what's today, Sunday, it was Thursday afternoon, I got a report that the woman, not the man, unfortunately, the man has like run off again. The husband has run off again. But the woman has got her city benefits turned back on, like the federal benefits turned back on, and is going through parenting courses because they have a daughter, and is allowed now into one of the private shelters. So it's like, yes, there's success, and no, there's a lot of tragedy along the way. But for this one couple, it took one social worker 2 solid months of her time, in addition to $8,500 extra dollars raised on top of what they already do. And so that's like one story, and there's hundreds of those stories of both success and no success. But we have about 7 initiatives now that we're working on, whereas before they created this position, we had 0. So I think in 2 years we're doing a little bit of good.
I'm curious as to whether you have any thoughts about steps that we might be able to take as a community and as individuals, for those of us who feel so disconnected to people who are living in poverty, living in the streets. We have our own little Oakville bubble sometimes, and we recognize, our hearts are to have everybody at the table for us to, but practically speaking, I know that we work and serve at the local soup kitchen and that kind of thing, but I know my own heart is, there's a big wrestle. There's the side of us that just kind of, I like my comfort zone. I like associating with people in the same economic, ish, and then there's the other part that's going, no, but my heart is for what Jesus calls us to. I can go and I can serve at the soup kitchen, but what else? How can we create a community that really does live out this great, huge mission in a place that's so affluent too?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I don't know sort of the demographics of Oakville other than what you just shared about it being a more affluent place, and there may be a soup kitchen nearby. And I would assume that Toronto has its fair share of homelessness and poverty. And so I think one of the questions then is what are we to do? I don't think it ought to be necessarily part of the vision to say we want as many people who are homeless at Reunion as there are affluent people, because we need to go 45 minutes out of our way and build a relationship with somebody and then bring them back here, right? So that's not necessarily the answer, but it's also irresponsible of us as followers of Jesus to walk by someone when we could help them. One of the things that I've learned in my role is that people who are homeless are, I know this is going to sound totally strange, they're people. They're actual human beings who if there was somebody sitting on the streets of Toronto and I wanted to talk to them, the first thing I would do is I would level myself with that person, get down on my knees and say, hey, my name is Brian. And if they wanted to talk, which most of the time the people I've stopped to talk to want to talk, then I would say, how you doing? Is there anything that I can help you with? They may say, no, I'm good. Or they may say, can I get $5 for some food? And it's up to you. One of the things I've learned is you know what? I'm hungry too. Why don't I go grab us something to eat? And then I sit down, and if I have time, share pizza with the individual. And then when it's over, say, thank you so much. Sometimes I'll say, can I pray for you? I'm not much of the, I want to pray for you type. That's just not who I am. And then there's other times that, I carry a bag with me everywhere I go, a knapsack, I think as they call it in Canada, backpack in the States. But I carry a backpack with me, and I have socks in my backpack. And so if I have nothing else, or if they ask for money and I don't feel comfortable giving money, I'll say something like, I don't have any money I can give you, but I got a pair of brand new socks. Would that interest you? And 100% of the time, it's a yes. And then we carry, in New York, I don't know if they have this in Toronto, but we carry cards with us that have all the shelter sites, listed so that if for some reason they don't know, and there's lots of people who don't know where to go, don't know, then we can point them in the right direction. I have a friendship with several people who are homeless, like strong friendship. They've come to my kids' ball games. I've taken them out to eat. They've gone to concerts with me. I have yet to invite anyone into my home. And I think part of that is, we could get into the psychology of it, but part of it is to create a safe place for both of us. And so I think the question is, like, in those moments is, the old question of, like, what would Jesus do is not really the question. The question is, like, how would Jesus respond if he were living my life, right? Like, what would be an appropriate response here? Because I can't do it all, but I can do for one person what I wish I could do for everyone. So that'd be like one thing I'd say is, like, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. So, because I literally pass probably 30 to 50 people who are homeless every day on my way to work or home. And if you stop long enough, and lean into that long enough, it will fill you with so much grief, you'll probably be rendered incapable of doing anything. However, I can do something for Matt. And that doesn't rid me of all the guilt of, not stopping for the other 30 or 40, but then it gives me the opportunity to pray that someone else will stop for them. And then I connect them to the resources that are available. And I want to count myself as a resource, right? Like, I want to count myself as a resource. But again, going back to your sort of observations, like, we're more affluent. Like, I would be considered affluent, I think, in New York, although not by New York standards, right? There's 400,000 millionaires in New York City, and there's 4 million people living at or beneath the poverty line. And I'm neither beneath the poverty line nor am I a millionaire. I'm somewhere in the middle, but I say, as a follower of Jesus, it's my responsibility to say, I'm going to do something about this, even if it makes me uncomfortable. Does that make sense? The best way, do we have time for one more story?
Let's do it.
The best way for me to sort of think about my role, your role, whether it's with people who are homeless or a next door neighbor who's going through a divorce or has cancer, or we're talking about undocumented immigrants or trafficking. I mean, we could talk about anything, right? To think about it as a Christian is, several years ago, our family took a trip to Washington, D.C. with another family. And so our family is big, 6 people. Their family is small, 3 people. And they're Chinese, which I'm telling you that for a reason. So we go walk the streets of DC, and that night they were like, oh, there's this incredible dim sum place over here on whatever street. And so we went and had dim sum, and it was absolutely fantastic. They're just bringing plates all night long and drinks all night long. I mean, we had a fantastic time there for a couple of hours. And so it gets to the end, and the bill comes. And so the server walks over, and the man grabs the bill, like the server's going to put it in the middle, and the man grabs the bill. And I could see, like, out of the corner of my eye, what the numbers were on the bill. And it was large, like dim sum with 9 people with drinks. Like, it was a costly meal in the several hundred, dollar range. And he grabs it, and I go, no, bro, I got it. And he goes, I got it. And I go, no, I mean, I'm going to help pay for that. Remember, there's 6 of us eating. There's only 3 of them. I go, well, at least let me pay for half. I mean, we owe at least 2/3, right? At least let me pay half. And he goes, no, I got it. And I go, why do you got it? Why do you have it and I don't? Like, let me get it. And so it was him, his name is Harvey, and his wife Josephine, and then me and our family sitting around here. And so we're sort of saying, no, I got it, no, I got it. I don't know if you've ever done that at a restaurant, And all of a sudden, in between that, his wife Josephine goes, we are paying for the food. And I go, why are you the ones paying for the food? And she goes, because we're Chinese. And I was like, I have no idea what that means. But I later learned what that meant. And I don't know if you have any friends who are Chinese or you're a part of this culture, but there is a culture of paying the bill where there are YouTube videos of people like literally fighting. And then there's some other like, sort of funny ones that are out there, sort of ironic, funny ones. Like when a Chinese family goes out to eat with another family, there is a fight over who will have the honor and the privilege of paying for the meal. And my friend was saying, when she said, we're paying for it because we are Chinese, that was her way of saying, like, it is our honor and our privilege to treat you for a meal. And in the moment that I learned what that meant, I thought this ought to be the culture of every single church in the world. That it is our honor and our privilege. Like, we're not doing this because we have to. No, we're not doing it, begrudgingly, disgruntled. We are doing it. We are serving the poor. We are helping undocumented immigrants. We are visiting the sick. We are caring for our divorced neighbor. We are going to the hospitals because it is our privilege and our honor. Like, the church is to be today what the world will be someday. Right? Have you ever heard that? Like, we are to be today what the world will be one day. And so anytime we encounter an opportunity, as you were talking about, anytime we encounter an opportunity, it is my honor. It is my privilege. And then if somebody ever asks you, why are you doing that, man? Why are you so generous? Why are you so kind? Why are you so loving? Why are you so patient with your children? Then you have an opportunity to tell them about this beautiful, amazing, loving God who loves us in such a way, who was so generous to us that he gave us his son, and that we're doing all of this because it's our honor and our privilege to serve this God who loves us so dearly. Does that make sense?
I love it. Can't wait till you plant Reunion, New York City. Dude, thank you so much for coming and sharing your heart and just friendship. Can we thank Brian? I just want to pray with you. And Justin, why don't we just end with singing the song, but we're not going to do communion, but why don't we just end by singing the song? So if you guys want to come up, I just want to pray for Brian. And God, I just thank you for friendship. And it's amazing how there's so much we can learn when we just stop to listen and pay attention. And the things that Brian has shared that are grabbing my mind and my heart and my attention this morning are things that he's learned from other people. And those ripples of just kind of being together and being family and listening and having eyes to see, that idea of I see you. And because you see me, I am here. Man, that is so, so powerful. So God, I just want to pray for Brian as you continue to use him in this work in New York City, this alliance, these amazing women and men who are serving, and as he says, often or all the time behind the scenes, where they count it as an honor to extend themselves to love, to care for, to see people, to help them. They give their lives for this. God, teach us what that means. Stretch us in those ways. I think we as a young church have so much to learn in that regard. Help us to see the people in our city. Help us to view it as an honor to sacrifice and lay ourselves down for the benefit and good of other people. God, I just pray for Brian and Allison and their kids and their marriage and their role there in the city. Continue just to use him as an encouragement, as someone who is there to help provide ways for people to be seen and to get the help they need. God, thank you for the things you've done in his life. We've heard his story of how you how you transitioned from a God who seemed so distant and a God who was keeping score to a God who says, I love you, I see you, and I welcome you to experience the fullness and beauty of what relationship looks like. So thanks for this friendship. Thanks for the way we can learn from each other. Jesus, we love you and serve you.